Question 1. The performance metrics show a significant drop in student interaction with the newly implemented online preparatory modules for the Agricultural University of Tirana entrance exam. Which of the following actions would best address this issue while adhering to the principles of fair and effective candidate preparation? Option A. Propose immediate, substantial alterations to the structure and difficulty of the entrance exam itself based on the observed engagement trends. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the online module content, delivery platform, and student feedback mechanisms to identify specific areas of disengagement and implement targeted improvements. Option C. Immediately cease the use of online modules and revert entirely to traditional, in-person lecture-based preparation sessions. Option D. Increase the volume of online content by adding more supplementary materials without analyzing current engagement patterns. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the online module content, delivery platform, and student feedback mechanisms to identify specific areas of disengagement and implement targeted improvements. Explanation. The performance metrics show a decline in student engagement with online learning modules introduced for the Agricultural University of Tirana entrance exam preparation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's mandate to provide accessible and effective preparation with the practical realities of student adoption and the need to adhere to established pedagogical principles and university regulations. A careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the decline and implement appropriate corrective actions without compromising the integrity or fairness of the entrance exam process. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the online module content, delivery platform, and student feedback mechanisms. This approach is right because it aligns with the university's commitment to quality education and fair assessment, as mandated by the Ministry of Education and Sports of Albania's regulations for higher education institutions. Specifically, it addresses the need for effective learning outcomes and student support, which are implicit in the university's mission and the entrance exam guidelines. Analyzing engagement data in conjunction with qualitative feedback allows for evidence-based adjustments that enhance the learning experience and ensure all candidates have a fair opportunity to prepare. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the quantity of online content without assessing its quality or relevance would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the potential issues of content overload, poor instructional design, or technical difficulties, which are common reasons for low engagement. Such an approach would violate the principle of providing effective learning resources and could disadvantage students who struggle with the poorly designed material. Another incorrect approach that involves reverting to purely traditional, in-person preparation methods without exploring the potential benefits of blended learning would also be professionally unsound. Traditional methods have their merits. Abandoning innovative approaches prematurely, especially without understanding the reasons for current disengagement, ignores the potential for digital tools to enhance accessibility and flexibility. This could lead to a less inclusive preparation process and fail to equip students with skills relevant to modern learning environments. A third incorrect approach that involves making arbitrary changes to the exam format based on perceived low engagement with preparation materials would be highly problematic. The entrance exam structure and content are determined by academic committees and regulatory bodies to ensure a standardized and fair assessment of candidates' suitability for agricultural studies. Unilateral changes without rigorous evaluation and approval would undermine the validity and reliability of the entrance examination, potentially leading to legal challenges and a loss of public trust. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a data-driven, iterative approach. First, clearly define the problem and gather comprehensive data, quantitative and qualitative. Second, analyze the data to identify root causes, considering pedagogical effectiveness, technical feasibility, and student needs. Third, develop a range of potential solutions, evaluating each against university regulations, ethical consideration, and educational best practices. Fourth, implement the chosen solution with a clear plan for monitoring and evaluation. Finally, be prepared to adapt and refine the approach based on ongoing feedback and results, always prioritizing fairness, equity, and the quality of education. Question 2. Quality control measures reveal that some of the examination papers for the upcoming entrance exam at the Agricultural University of Tirana may have been compromised prior to distribution. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure the integrity of the admission process? Option A. Inform the candidates individually about the potential compromise and ask them to report any suspicious observations during the exam. Option B. Immediately initiate a formal investigation by the University Admissions Committee to assess the extent of the compromise and determine appropriate remedial actions, while temporarily securing all affected materials. Option C. Proceed with the examination as scheduled to avoid disruption, and address any potential issues only if candidates raise formal complaints. Option D. Cancel the entire entrance examination for all applicants to prevent any possibility of unfair advantage and reschedule at a later date. Correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a formal investigation by the University Admissions Committee to assess the extent of the compromise and determine appropriate remedial actions, while temporarily securing all affected materials. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge related to the integrity of the entrance examination process at the Agricultural University of Tirana. The discovery of potential irregularities in the exam materials requires a careful and ethical response to uphold the fairness and credibility of the admission process. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate action with the requirement for a thorough, unbiased investigation, ensuring that all candidates are treated equitably and that the university's reputation is protected. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and transparent investigation initiated by the relevant university committee responsible for admissions and examinations. This approach is justified by the need to adhere to the principles of academic integrity and fairness, which are fundamental to any educational institution. Specifically, it aligns with the general principles of good governance and administrative procedure expected of public institutions like the Agricultural University of Tirana, which would typically have internal regulations or directives governing examination conduct and dispute resolution. This process ensures that any findings are based on evidence, that due process is followed, and that appropriate remedial actions are taken without prejudicing innocent candidates. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that immediately cancels the examination for all candidates without a thorough investigation is procedurally flawed. This is an overreaction that punishes all candidates, including those who may have prepared diligently and ethically, based on unconfirmed suspicions. It fails to uphold the principle of individual assessment and due process. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discovered irregularities and proceed with the examination as planned. This is ethically unacceptable, as it knowingly allows a potentially compromised examination to proceed, undermining the fairness of the admission process and the credibility of the university. It violates the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent selection process. Finally, an approach that involves selectively questioning or disqualifying candidates based on mere suspicion without concrete evidence is also unacceptable. This violates the principles of natural justice and fairness, as it presumes guilt without proof and can lead to the wrongful exclusion of deserving candidates. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic administration must adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with such challenges. This involves 1. Identifying the issue and its potential impact. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies, regulations, and ethical guidelines of the Agricultural University of Tirana. 3. Gathering information and evidence objectively. 4. Involving the appropriate oversight bodies or committees. 5. Developing a plan of action that is fair, transparent, and procedurally sound. 6. Communicating decisions clearly and appropriately. 7. Implementing corrective measures and reviewing processes to prevent future occurrences. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a first-year student at the Agricultural University of Tirana, facing significant personal challenges impacting their academic performance, has requested a review of their admission status. The student has provided documentation of their circumstances, but has not met the minimum academic requirements for progression. What is the most appropriate course of action for the university administration to ensure adherence to its regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Initiate a formal review process involving the Academic Affairs Committee and Student Support Services to assess the student's situation against university regulations and available support options, documenting all steps and decisions. Option B. Advise the student to reapply for admission in a future academic year without considering their current circumstances or available support mechanisms. Option C. Immediately grant the student an extension to meet the academic requirements, bypassing the standard progression review process. Option D. Inform the student that their admission status is irrevocably lost due to failure to meet academic thresholds, without exploring any further recourse. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal review process involving the Academic Affairs Committee and Student Support Services to assess the student's situation against university regulations and available support options, documenting all steps and decisions. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing academic integrity with the practicalities of student support, particularly when a student's academic performance is impacted by personal circumstances. The Agricultural University of Tirana, like any academic institution, operates under specific regulations and ethical guidelines governing student assessment, admissions, and support services. The challenge lies in adhering to these regulations while demonstrating empathy and fairness. A governance review might highlight the need for clear protocols in such situations to ensure consistency and prevent bias. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of the student's situation, considering all relevant academic policies and support mechanisms available within the Agricultural University of Tirana's framework. This includes consulting with relevant university departments, e.g., academic affairs, student services, and ensuring that any decision made is in line with the university statutes and internal regulations concerning student progression and appeals. The ethical justification rests on principles of fairness, due process, and the university's commitment to supporting its students within established boundaries. This approach upholds the integrity of the academic process while acknowledging individual circumstances. An incorrect approach would be to make an immediate decision based solely on the student's personal narrative, without a formal review process. This bypasses established university procedures and could lead to inconsistent or unfair outcomes, potentially violating the university's internal regulations on admissions and academic standing. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's concerns outright, failing to explore available support services or academic accommodations as outlined by the university's student welfare policies. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to ethical obligations of care and support. A third incorrect approach would be to grant an exception to established academic policies without proper authorization or a clear, documented rationale, which could undermine the credibility of the university's assessment system and set a problematic precedent, violating the principle of equal application of rules. Professionals in academic administration should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the specific regulations and policies of the Agricultural University of Tirana. This involves identifying the relevant academic and administrative departments, gathering all necessary documentation, and following established procedures for review and appeal. Ethical considerations should guide the process, ensuring fairness, transparency, and student welfare are prioritized within the legal and regulatory framework of the institution. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a postgraduate student at the Agricultural University of Tirana has developed a novel method for pest resistance in a specific crop, based on research conducted using university facilities and under the supervision of faculty members. The student has been approached by a private agricultural company offering a substantial sum for immediate access to the raw research data and the opportunity to present the findings at their upcoming industry conference, which could lead to personal financial gain for the student. Which approach best upholds the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines of the Agricultural University of Tirana? Option A. Immediately share the raw data with the company and present the findings at their conference to secure personal and institutional benefits. Option B. Decline the company's offer entirely and publish the findings in an academic journal without considering any potential commercial applications or university involvement. Option C. Present the preliminary findings at a local farmers market to gauge public interest before any formal university involvement. Option D. Seek formal approval from the university's Research Ethics Committee and Technology Transfer Office to explore potential commercialization pathways, ensuring proper intellectual property protection and benefit-sharing agreements are established. The correct answer is A. Immediately share the raw data with the company and present the findings at their conference to secure personal and institutional benefits. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge related to the ethical and regulatory responsibilities of a student or researcher within the Agricultural University of Tirana. The core issue is the potential misuse of research findings for personal gain, which conflicts with academic integrity and the principles of responsible scientific conduct as likely outlined in the university's internal regulations and Albanian academic law. The pressure to publish and the desire for recognition can create a conflict of interest, requiring careful navigation to uphold ethical standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the research and adhering to the established protocols for data dissemination and intellectual property. This means ensuring that any publication or presentation of findings is done through official university channels, respecting the university's policies on research and intellectual property rights. This aligns with the likely regulatory framework of the Agricultural University of Tirana, which would emphasize academic honesty, proper attribution, and the responsible use of university resources and research outcomes. The ethical imperative is to avoid any action that could be construed as plagiarism, unauthorized use of university data, or a conflict of interest that undermines the academic mission. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting the preliminary findings at a commercial agricultural fair without prior university approval or proper attribution is ethically problematic. It bypasses the established academic review and dissemination processes, potentially misrepresenting the research's stage of development, and failing to acknowledge the university's role and ownership of the intellectual property. This could violate university regulations on research conduct and intellectual property. Sharing the raw data with a private company for their exclusive use before official publication or patenting is a significant ethical and regulatory breach. It constitutes unauthorized disclosure of potentially valuable research data, which belongs to the university. This action could jeopardize future publication opportunities, compromise the university's intellectual property rights, and potentially lead to legal repercussions for both the student and the university. Claiming sole authorship and ownership of the research findings without acknowledging the contributions of supervisors or the university's resources is a clear violation of academic integrity and likely Albanian copyright and intellectual property laws. It constitutes academic dishonesty and misrepresentation of intellectual contribution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic settings must always operate within the established legal and ethical frameworks of their institutions. When faced with potential conflicts of interest or opportunities for personal gain arising from academic work, the decision-making process should involve 1. Consulting university policies and relevant national laws regarding research, intellectual property, and academic conduct. 2. Seeking guidance from supervisors and relevant university departments, e.g., Research Ethics Committee, Technology Transfer Office. 3. Prioritizing transparency, honesty, and adherence to established procedures for data management, publication, and intellectual property protection. 4. Recognizing that academic research is a collaborative endeavor often supported by institutional resources, and its outcomes are subject to institutional policies. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a prospective student preparing for the Agricultural University of Tirana entrance exam is struggling to find official study materials and is considering using a collection of notes shared by a former student who claims they are comprehensive. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the prospective student? Option A. Purchase a widely advertised, third-party study guide that claims to cover all aspects of the entrance exam syllabus. Option B. Utilize the shared notes from the former student, assuming they are accurate and sufficient for exam preparation, to save time and effort. Option C. Search online forums and unofficial student groups for any available study materials, regardless of their source or verification. Option D. Directly contact the Agricultural University of Tirana's admissions office or relevant academic department to inquire about recommended or officially provided preparatory resources. Correct answer is D. Directly contact the Agricultural University of Tirana's admissions office or relevant academic department to inquire about recommended or officially provided preparatory resources. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge related to the ethical sourcing of research materials and the potential conflict between academic integrity and resource limitations. A prospective student at the Agricultural University of Tirana, preparing for their entrance exam, needs to demonstrate an understanding of responsible research practices. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for accurate and reliable data with the ethical imperative to obtain materials through legitimate and transparent channels, adhering to the principles of academic honesty as expected by the university. The correct approach involves proactively seeking guidance from the Agricultural University of Tirana's admissions office or relevant faculty regarding acceptable sources for preparatory materials. This demonstrates a commitment to following established university procedures and ethical guidelines. It ensures that the student is using resources that are officially sanctioned or recommended, thereby avoiding any potential issues with academic misconduct or the use of unverified information. This aligns with the university's regulatory framework, which implicitly or explicitly promotes academic integrity and fair assessment practices for all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to rely on unofficial or potentially plagiarized study materials obtained from unauthorized online sources. This fails to adhere to the university's commitment to academic honesty and could lead to the use of inaccurate or misleading information, jeopardizing the student's chances in the entrance exam. Furthermore, it bypasses the established channels for obtaining legitimate study resources, which is a breach of ethical conduct expected of prospective students. Another incorrect approach would be to purchase study guides from third-party vendors without verifying their authenticity or alignment with the official curriculum. This carries the risk of using outdated or irrelevant material, and more importantly, it does not demonstrate the proactive engagement with the university's resources that is indicative of a serious and ethically minded candidate. It suggests a lack of diligence in understanding the university's specific requirements and expectations. The professional decision-making process for a prospective student in this situation should involve a clear understanding of the importance of academic integrity. This means prioritizing official communication channels with the university, seeking clarification on acceptable study resources, and demonstrating a commitment to ethical practices from the outset. The student should view the entrance exam preparation not just as a test of knowledge, but also as an opportunity to showcase their understanding of academic principles and their suitability for the institution. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of data entries in a research project that appear to deviate from expected biological variability, suggesting a potential for data manipulation. As an applicant to the Agricultural University of Tirana, what is the most appropriate immediate action to take? Option A. Report the observed pattern of data deviation to the project supervisor or the university's research ethics committee. Option B. Attempt to adjust the data entries to align with expected patterns before reporting anything. Option C. Ignore the data deviations, assuming they are minor errors that will not significantly impact the overall findings. Option D. Discuss the observed data deviations with fellow students to gauge their opinions before taking any action. The correct answer is A. Report the observed pattern of data deviation to the project supervisor or the university's research ethics committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to interpret and apply the principles of agricultural research integrity as understood within the context of the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam framework. The core of the challenge lies in identifying the most ethically sound and scientifically rigorous response when faced with potential data manipulation, which directly impacts the validity of research and the credibility of the institution. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine scientific inquiry and actions that compromise research ethics. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the observed discrepancy to the designated supervisor or ethics committee. This represents best professional practice because it adheres to the fundamental principles of academic integrity and research ethics, which are implicitly expected of all candidates seeking admission to a reputable agricultural university. Such reporting ensures that potential misconduct is investigated through established institutional channels, safeguarding the integrity of the research process and upholding the university's commitment to producing reliable scientific knowledge. This aligns with the general ethical guidelines for research, emphasizing transparency and accountability. An incorrect approach of ignoring the discrepancy is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes a failure to uphold research integrity and a dereliction of ethical duty. By not reporting, the applicant implicitly condones potential misconduct, which can lead to the dissemination of false or misleading scientific information, harming the agricultural sector and public trust. Another incorrect approach of attempting to correct the data independently without proper authorization is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses established protocols for data verification and correction, potentially introducing further bias or errors. It undermines the systematic and transparent nature of scientific investigation and could be construed as an attempt to conceal or manipulate evidence, which is a serious ethical breach. A further incorrect approach of discussing the issue only with colleagues without formal reporting is professionally unacceptable. While collegial discussion can be helpful, it does not fulfill the ethical obligation to formally report suspected misconduct through the appropriate channels. This informal approach risks the issue being dismissed or not addressed systematically, failing to protect the integrity of the research and the institution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's ethical guidelines and reporting procedures. When faced with suspected research misconduct, the immediate steps should be to document observations objectively and report them to the appropriate authority, such as a research supervisor, department head, or ethics committee, allowing for a formal and impartial investigation. Question 7. The audit findings indicate potential procedural deviations in the administration of the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance examination, specifically concerning the verification of applicant documentation and the recording of scores. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Disregard the audit findings as minor procedural oversights and proceed with the admissions process without further inquiry to avoid delays. Option B. Convene a special committee, including representatives from academic affairs, legal counsel, and the internal audit department, to conduct a comprehensive and independent investigation into the identified deviations. Option C. Immediately suspend the ongoing admissions process and initiate disciplinary proceedings against the examination committee members based on the preliminary audit report. Option D. Publicly announce the audit findings to the student body and faculty, emphasizing the need for transparency while awaiting further investigation. The correct answer is B. Convene a special committee, including representatives from academic affairs, legal counsel, and the internal audit department, to conduct a comprehensive and independent investigation into the identified deviations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the integrity of academic admissions processes at the Agricultural University of Tirana. The audit findings suggest potential irregularities that could compromise the fairness and validity of student selection. The challenge lies in discerning the appropriate response to these findings, balancing the need for thorough investigation with the university's operational continuity and reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are both legally compliant and ethically sound, upholding the principles of academic integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal, independent investigation into the audit findings. This is the most appropriate response because it acknowledges the seriousness of the allegations and ensures an objective review. Such an investigation would typically be conducted by a designated internal committee or an external body with expertise in academic admissions and compliance. This process allows for the systematic collection and analysis of evidence, ensuring that any conclusions are based on facts. This aligns with the general principles of good governance and academic administration, which mandate transparency and accountability in admissions. While specific regulations for the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam audit procedures are not provided, the principle of a thorough, impartial investigation is a universal best practice in academic institutions to maintain credibility and fairness. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating immediate disciplinary action against specific individuals without a formal investigation is an incorrect approach. This constitutes a failure to adhere to due process, potentially leading to wrongful accusations and legal repercussions. It bypasses the necessary steps of evidence gathering and fair hearing, violating principles of natural justice. Ignoring the audit findings and continuing with the admissions process as usual is also an incorrect approach. This demonstrates a disregard for established oversight mechanisms and a failure to address potential systemic issues. It risks perpetuating any irregularities, undermining the credibility of the university, and potentially leading to future legal or reputational damage. Such an action could be seen as a dereliction of duty by university leadership. Publicly disclosing the audit findings and speculating on their implications before a formal investigation is an incorrect approach. This premature disclosure can damage the reputation of the university and individuals involved, create undue public anxiety, and potentially prejudice the outcome of any subsequent investigation. It violates principles of confidentiality and due process. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the findings and their potential implications. Second, consult relevant university policies, statutes, and any applicable national regulations pertaining to academic admissions and internal audits. Third, convene relevant stakeholders, e.g., academic leadership, legal counsel, audit committee, to discuss the findings and determine the appropriate course of action. Fourth, prioritize a fair, impartial, and thorough investigation. Fifth, ensure all actions are documented and communicated appropriately, maintaining confidentiality where necessary. Finally, implement corrective actions based on the investigation's outcomes and review internal processes to prevent recurrence. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a researcher at the Agricultural University of Tirana requires specialized soil amendments for a critical experiment. A colleague suggests a supplier known to them personally, highlighting potential cost savings and faster delivery. The researcher is aware that this supplier is not on the university's approved vendor list, and no formal procurement process has been initiated for this specific need. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the researcher to obtain these soil amendments? Option A. Accept the discounted rate from the suggested supplier without a formal order, arranging for direct payment to the supplier to expedite the process and avoid bureaucratic hurdles. Option B. Proceed with ordering from the suggested supplier, leveraging the personal connection to secure the cost savings and faster delivery, assuming the quality is acceptable for the research. Option C. Initiate a formal procurement process to evaluate the suggested supplier alongside other potential vendors, ensuring all university purchasing policies and ethical guidelines regarding conflicts of interest are strictly followed. Option D. Inform the colleague that the university's approved vendor list must be followed and request that the colleague facilitate an introduction to an approved vendor who can supply the needed amendments. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal procurement process to evaluate the suggested supplier alongside other potential vendors, ensuring all university purchasing policies and ethical guidelines regarding conflicts of interest are strictly followed. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge related to the ethical sourcing of research materials and the potential for conflicts of interest, which are critical considerations within the academic and research integrity framework of the Agricultural University of Tirana. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for high-quality, cost-effective inputs for research with the imperative to maintain transparency and avoid any perception of impropriety. Adhering to the university's internal regulations and the broader ethical guidelines governing agricultural research in Albania is paramount. The correct approach involves a transparent and documented process for selecting suppliers, prioritizing quality and adherence to research protocols over personal relationships or potential cost savings that might be perceived as influenced by such relationships. This aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity, ensuring that research outcomes are unbiased and credible. Specifically, it requires a formal procurement process that evaluates multiple suppliers based on objective criteria, such as product quality, reliability, and compliance with agricultural standards relevant to Albania. Any potential conflicts of interest, even if only perceived, must be proactively managed through disclosure and adherence to university policy. This approach upholds the principles of fairness, accountability, and scientific rigor. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a personal connection for a perceived cost advantage fails to uphold transparency and could lead to accusations of favoritism or even corruption. This violates the ethical obligation to conduct research impartially and could compromise the integrity of the research findings. Relying solely on a supplier recommended by a friend without a formal evaluation process, even if the friend is a reputable professional, bypasses necessary due diligence and opens the door to potential quality issues or undisclosed biases. Such an action undermines trust within the academic community and could have reputational consequences for both the researcher and the university. Another incorrect approach, which involves accepting a discounted rate from a supplier without proper documentation or justification, also presents significant ethical and regulatory concerns. This could be interpreted as an undeclared gift or benefit, creating a conflict of interest and potentially influencing future procurement decisions. It bypasses the university's financial controls and procurement policies, which are designed to ensure value for money and prevent financial impropriety. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the Agricultural University of Tirana's procurement policies, conflict of interest guidelines, and general principles of research ethics. When faced with a decision that could potentially involve personal relationships or perceived benefits, a professional should always err on the side of caution and transparency. This means initiating a formal, documented process, disclosing any potential conflicts, and ensuring that all decisions are based on objective criteria that serve the best interests of the research and the university. Question 9. The assessment process reveals an applicant for the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance examination has submitted an incomplete application, lacking one of the officially required supporting documents as stipulated in the university's admission regulations. The applicant is otherwise academically strong and has expressed significant enthusiasm for their chosen field of study. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee, strictly adhering to the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam framework? Option A. Admit the applicant provisionally, assuming the missing document will be provided later, given their strong academic profile and expressed interest. Option B. Waive the requirement for the missing document, considering the applicant's potential and the overall competitiveness of the applicant pool. Option C. Reject the application immediately due to the incomplete submission, without further inquiry or opportunity for the applicant to rectify the omission. Option D. Request the applicant to submit the missing document within a specified time frame, as per the university's established procedure for incomplete applications, if such a procedure is outlined in the regulations. The correct answer is D. Request the applicant to submit the missing document within a specified time frame, as per the university's established procedure for incomplete applications, if such a procedure is outlined in the regulations. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in university admissions, ensuring fairness and adherence to established procedures while evaluating diverse applicant profiles. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the admissions committee to balance the university's stated criteria with the unique circumstances of an applicant, all while maintaining the integrity of the entrance examination process as defined by the Agricultural University of Tirana's regulations. The pressure to admit promising students can sometimes lead to temptations to deviate from strict protocols, which could undermine the credibility of the entire selection process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the published admission requirements for the Agricultural University of Tirana. This means verifying that all mandatory documents are present and correctly filled out, and that the applicant meets the minimum academic prerequisites as outlined in the university's official entrance examination guidelines. If there are any ambiguities or missing components, the correct procedure is to communicate these deficiencies to the applicant and provide a clear, regulated pathway for rectification, if such a pathway is permitted by the university's rules. This approach upholds the principle of equal opportunity by applying the same standards to all candidates and ensures transparency and accountability in the admissions process, aligning with the regulatory framework governing the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exams. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the missing documentation based on a perceived potential of the applicant. This failure directly contravenes the established admission regulations of the Agricultural University of Tirana, which mandate specific documentation for eligibility. It introduces subjectivity and bias, potentially disadvantaging other applicants who meticulously followed the rules. Another incorrect approach is to make an exception without a clear, documented basis within the university's official guidelines for such exceptions. This undermines the fairness and consistency of the examination process and could set a precedent for future deviations, eroding the authority of the established regulations. A third incorrect approach is to assume the applicant's qualifications are sufficient without independent verification, which bypasses the due diligence required by the university's admission procedures and risks admitting unqualified candidates. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to the specific regulatory framework of the Agricultural University of Tirana. This involves a systematic review of all applications against published criteria, clear communication with applicants regarding requirements and deficiencies, and a commitment to consistent application of the rules. When faced with unusual circumstances, the decision-making process should involve consulting the official university statutes and guidelines for admissions, and if necessary, seeking clarification from the relevant university authorities to ensure any action taken is compliant and defensible. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a submitted essay for the Agricultural University of Tirana entrance exam contains passages that bear a striking resemblance to published academic work, raising concerns about potential plagiarism. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism, gathering evidence and providing the applicant an opportunity to respond, in accordance with university regulations. Option B. Conduct a brief, informal conversation with the applicant about the essay's content without documenting the discussion or initiating formal procedures. Option C. Immediately disqualify the applicant from the entrance examination due to suspected academic dishonesty. Option D. Proceed with the application as normal, assuming the resemblance is coincidental and not intentional plagiarism. The correct answer is C. Immediately disqualify the applicant from the entrance examination due to suspected academic dishonesty. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge related to academic integrity and the proper handling of potential plagiarism within the context of the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance examination regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to uphold academic standards and prevent unfair advantages with the procedural fairness owed to the applicant. Misjudging the situation could lead to either an unjust disqualification or a failure to address academic misconduct effectively, both of which have significant implications for the university's reputation and the integrity of its admissions process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based investigation into the suspected plagiarism, adhering strictly to the Agricultural University of Tirana's established procedures for academic misconduct. This means gathering all relevant documentation, comparing the applicant's work against original sources, and providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond to the allegations. This approach is justified by the university's commitment to academic honesty, as typically outlined in its statutes and examination regulations, which mandate fair procedures and due process for all candidates. The principle of innocent until proven guilty is paramount, requiring concrete evidence before any punitive action is taken. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately disqualifies the applicant based on suspicion alone fails to adhere to due process. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses the established investigation and response mechanisms mandated by the university's academic integrity policies. It assumes guilt without providing the applicant an opportunity to explain or refute the evidence, violating principles of fairness. An approach that ignores the suspected plagiarism and proceeds with the application without further review is an ethical and regulatory failure, undermines the university's commitment to academic honesty, and creates an unfair advantage for the applicant, potentially admitting individuals who have not met the required standards of original work. This dereliction of duty compromises the integrity of the entire admissions process. An approach that involves an informal, unsubstantiated discussion with the applicant without documenting the findings or following formal procedures is also problematic. While seemingly attempting to resolve the issue, it lacks the rigor and accountability required by university regulations. Such an approach may not yield a definitive resolution and leaves the university vulnerable to challenges regarding its handling of academic misconduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic admissions must operate within a framework of established regulations and ethical principles. When faced with potential academic misconduct, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential violation and relevant university policies. 2. Gathering objective evidence. 3. Initiating a formal investigation process as per university guidelines. 4. providing the candidate with a clear explanation of the allegations and an opportunity to respond. 5. Making a decision based on the evidence and the candidate's response in accordance with university regulations. This structured approach ensures fairness, transparency, and adherence to the highest academic standards. Question 11. Upon reviewing preliminary results for a research project on novel fertilizer applications for wheat yield, a student discovers that a significant portion of the data, while meticulously collected, does not support their initial hypothesis that the new fertilizer will significantly increase yield compared to control groups. The student is concerned about the impact of these findings on their overall project evaluation and their potential for future academic opportunities. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the student? Option A. Discuss with their supervisor the possibility of adjusting the data to better fit the hypothesis, framing it as a way to improve the project's perceived success. Option B. Alter the collected data points to align with the expected positive outcome of the hypothesis, thereby ensuring a more successful project evaluation. Option C. Report all collected data accurately, including the results that do not support the hypothesis, and discuss the implications and potential reasons for these findings in the research report. Option D. Selectively present only the data that supports the initial hypothesis, omitting the contradictory results to create a more favorable impression of the research. The correct answer is C. Report all collected data accurately, including the results that do not support the hypothesis, and discuss the implications and potential reasons for these findings in the research report. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve positive results for a research project. Candidate must navigate the ethical implications of data manipulation and understand the regulatory framework governing research at the Agricultural University of Tirana. Careful judgment is required to uphold scientific standards and avoid actions that could compromise the validity of research and the reputation of the university. The correct approach involves transparently reporting all findings, including those that do not support the initial hypothesis. This aligns with the core principles of scientific research, which demand honesty, accuracy, and objectivity. Specifically, the regulatory framework for academic research at the Agricultural University of Tirana, as is standard in reputable academic institutions, mandates the truthful presentation of data. This includes acknowledging all results, whether they confirm or refute a hypothesis, and avoiding any form of falsification or selective reporting. Ethical guidelines for researchers emphasize the importance of integrity and the responsibility to contribute to the body of scientific knowledge accurately. An incorrect approach would be to selectively present only the data that supports the hypothesis, omitting contradictory results. This constitutes data manipulation and scientific misconduct, violating the fundamental ethical obligation of researchers to report findings truthfully. Such an action undermines the scientific process and can lead to flawed conclusions, misinformed future research, and a loss of credibility. Another incorrect approach would be to alter the data to fit the expected outcome. This is outright falsification, a severe ethical breach, and a direct violation of research integrity principles. It not only misrepresents the research, but also deceives the academic community and the public. A further incorrect approach would be to consult with a professor about adjusting the data to achieve a more favorable outcome. While seeking guidance is encouraged, seeking advice on manipulating data is unethical and unprofessional. It implies a willingness to compromise integrity for the sake of appearance, which is contrary to the principles of responsible research conduct. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to university regulations. When faced with unexpected or unfavorable results, a researcher should first re-verify their methodology and data collection to rule out errors. If the results remain consistent, the professional duty is to report them accurately and discuss their implications, even if they challenge the initial hypothesis. This process fosters a culture of genuine scientific inquiry and ensures that research contributes reliably to the field. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new large-scale greenhouse project could significantly increase local crop yields and generate substantial revenue for the region. However, concerns have been raised regarding its potential impact on local water resources and the displacement of traditional farming practices. considering the regulatory framework and guiding principles for agricultural development in Albania, which approach best balances economic opportunity with environmental and social responsibility. Option A. Reject the project outright due to the potential for negative impacts, focusing solely on preserving existing traditional farming methods without exploring opportunities for modernization or economic growth. Option B. Conduct a thorough environmental and social impact assessment (ESA) that quantifies potential negative effects on water resources and traditional farming, and explore alternative project designs or mitigation strategies that align with Albanian environmental protection laws and sustainable agricultural development goals before making a final decision. Option C. Proceed with the project immediately, prioritizing the economic benefits and assuming that any negative environmental or social impacts can be mitigated later with minimal cost. Option D. Focus exclusively on the projected revenue and job creation, assuming that market forces will naturally address any environmental or social externalities that may arise. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the project immediately, prioritizing the economic benefits and assuming that any negative environmental or social impacts can be mitigated later with minimal cost. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate economic benefits of a proposed agricultural project with its potential long-term environmental and social impacts, all within the specific regulatory framework of Albania, as applicable to the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam context. The challenge lies in identifying the most ethically and legally sound approach to evaluating such a project, ensuring that decisions align with national agricultural policies, environmental protection laws, and sustainable development principles. Careful judgment is required to avoid prioritizing short-term gains over long-term viability and public good. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment that integrates economic viability with environmental sustainability and social equity, guided by Albanian legislation concerning agricultural development and environmental impact. This means not only quantifying potential profits, but also rigorously evaluating the ecological footprint, resource depletion, and community well-being. Such an approach is justified by the overarching principles of sustainable agriculture, which are increasingly embedded in national and international frameworks, and by the ethical responsibility to ensure that agricultural practices benefit society without compromising future generations. Adherence to relevant Albanian laws, such as those governing land use, water management, and environmental protection, is paramount. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing immediate economic returns without adequately considering environmental degradation or social disruption fails to comply with the spirit and letter of sustainable development principles and potentially violates specific environmental and social impact assessment regulations in Albania. This approach is ethically flawed as it prioritizes profit over the well-being of ecosystems and local communities. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a single aspect, such as purely environmental preservation, without considering economic feasibility, might also be problematic. While well-intentioned, it could lead to impractical solutions that hinder necessary agricultural development and economic growth, failing to meet the holistic requirements of sustainable land management and rural livelihoods as envisioned by national policies. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or incomplete data for the assessment, even if it attempts to consider multiple factors, would be professionally unsound. This leads to flawed conclusions and potentially harmful decisions, as it does not reflect the current realities of the agricultural sector or the most up-to-date scientific understanding of environmental and social impacts. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation, a thorough review of existing national and local regulations, the application of established methodologies for environmental and social impact assessments, and a commitment to transparency and evidence-based decision-making. Professionals must adopt a holistic perspective, recognizing the interconnectedness of economic, environmental, and social factors in agricultural development. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that a key objective for the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam is to assess candidates' understanding of how economic policy can drive the adoption of sustainable agricultural practices. Considering the principles of agricultural economics and the need for environmental stewardship in modern farming. Which of the following policy interventions would most effectively incentivize farmers to transition towards more sustainable methods in the Albanian agricultural sector? Option A. Introducing a carbon tax on agricultural emissions to discourage environmentally damaging practices. Option B. Implementing direct subsidies for all agricultural products to increase overall farm income. Option C. Providing targeted financial incentives and technical support for farmers adopting organic farming and soil conservation techniques. Option D. Investing heavily in research and development of new, high-yield crop varieties without specific environmental considerations. The correct answer is B. Implementing direct subsidies for all agricultural products to increase overall farm income. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for prospective students of the Agricultural University of Tirana regarding their understanding of the foundational principles of agricultural economics and policy as they relate to sustainable farming practices, a core component of modern agricultural education. The difficulty lies in discerning the most impactful policy lever from a list of options, requiring not just knowledge of agricultural economics, but also an awareness of current policy debates and their practical implications within the Albanian context, as implied by the exam's jurisdiction. The correct approach involves identifying the policy that directly addresses the economic incentives for farmers to adopt environmentally sound practices, thereby promoting long-term sustainability. This aligns with the overarching goals of agricultural education at a university like the Agricultural University of Tirana, which aims to equip students with the knowledge to contribute to a resilient and sustainable agricultural sector. Such a policy would likely involve financial mechanisms or regulatory frameworks that make sustainable methods economically viable and attractive compared to conventional, potentially less sustainable, alternatives. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on policies that increase general agricultural output without a specific sustainability component. While increased production is a goal, it does not inherently guarantee environmental stewardship. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize policies that offer short-term subsidies without considering their long-term economic or environmental consequences, potentially leading to market distortions or dependency. Finally, an approach that emphasizes purely theoretical economic models without practical application to the realities of farming in Albania would also be flawed, as entrance exams typically assess the ability to apply knowledge to real-world contexts. Professionals in agricultural policy and economics must first understand the specific context and objectives. They should then evaluate potential policy interventions based on their alignment with these objectives, their economic feasibility, their environmental impact, and their social equity. A robust decision-making process involves considering the interconnectedness of economic, social, and environmental factors, and prioritizing solutions that offer sustainable, long-term benefits. Question 14. Examination of the data shows that a prospective student for the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam is considering various methods to enhance their preparation. They have access to a comprehensive list of officially recommended textbooks and past examination papers provided by the university. However, they also have heard about unofficial online forums where students share notes and discuss potential exam topics. And a former student mentioned that some questions from previous years are often repeated with minor variations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of academic integrity and the regulatory framework for the Agricultural University of Tirana entrance exam? Option A. Relying primarily on notes and discussions from unofficial online forums, assuming they offer insights into frequently tested areas. Option B. Thoroughly studying the officially recommended textbooks and diligently analyzing the provided past examination papers to understand the scope and style of questions. Option C. Focusing on memorizing answers from past papers without understanding the underlying concepts, as this is a common strategy for exam success. Option D. Attempting to find and utilize leaked examination questions from previous years, believing this will guarantee familiarity with the exact content. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly studying the officially recommended textbooks and diligently analyzing the provided past examination papers to understand the scope and style of questions. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring agricultural professional regarding the ethical sourcing and use of information for their entrance exam preparation. The core professional challenge lies in maintaining academic integrity and adhering to the specific examination regulations of the Agricultural University of Tirana. Misrepresenting one's qualifications or using unauthorized materials is a direct violation of these principles, potentially leading to disqualification and damage to one's reputation. The correct approach involves diligently preparing using only the officially sanctioned study materials and adhering strictly to the examination guidelines provided by the Agricultural University of Tirana. This demonstrates a commitment to fair play, academic honesty, and respect for the established examination process. Specifically, it aligns with the implicit and explicit ethical standards of academic institutions which prioritize merit and integrity. By focusing on authorized resources, the candidate ensures their knowledge is assessed fairly and that they are not gaining an unfair advantage. An incorrect approach of fabricating academic achievements or misrepresenting prior coursework would be a direct ethical failure. This constitutes academic dishonesty, undermining the credibility of the examination process and the university itself. Such actions violate the fundamental principles of truthfulness and integrity expected of all students. Another incorrect approach, such as seeking to obtain or use leaked examination questions, is not only unethical but also illegal and would result in severe penalties, including immediate disqualification and potential legal repercussions, directly contravening the examination's integrity protocols. A third incorrect approach, relying on unverified or unofficial study guides that may contain inaccurate information or go beyond the scope of the syllabus, risks leading to a misunderstanding of the required knowledge and a poor performance, while also potentially violating the spirit of using approved materials if these unofficial guides are presented as equivalent to official ones. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the examination's rules and regulations. Candidates must prioritize honesty, integrity, and adherence to established procedures. When in doubt about the permissibility of a particular study method or resource, it is always best to seek clarification from the examination authorities. The focus should always be on demonstrating genuine understanding and preparation through legitimate means. Question 15. Assessment of the ethical and regulatory considerations for an agricultural graduate proposing the immediate adoption of a novel, genetically modified crop variety with purported yield enhancements, but lacking comprehensive long-term environmental impact studies within the context of Albanian agricultural regulations and the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam framework. Option A suggests that the graduate focus solely on the theoretical yield benefits in academic discussions, without engaging in any practical considerations of implementation, safety, or regulatory compliance, as this is beyond the scope of an entrance exam question. Option B. Urge immediate widespread adoption by farmers, emphasizing the potential economic gains and yield improvements, and suggesting that any environmental concerns are likely exaggerated and will be addressed if they arise. Option C. Advocate for a phased introduction of the crop variety, initiating pilot programs in controlled environments, conducting rigorous, independent environmental and safety assessments in accordance with Albanian agricultural law, and engaging in transparent dialogue with farmers and regulatory bodies before any wider dissemination. Option D. Propose bypassing official Albanian regulatory approval processes for this specific innovation, arguing that its novelty warrants a more agile, market-driven approach to allow farmers quick access to its benefits. The correct answer is C. Advocate for a phased introduction of the crop variety, initiating pilot programs in controlled environments, conducting rigorous, independent environmental and safety assessments in accordance with Albanian agricultural law, and engaging in transparent dialogue with farmers and regulatory bodies before any wider dissemination. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring agricultural professional regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of introducing a new, potentially beneficial, but not fully tested, agricultural technology. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits for farmers and the environment with the responsibility to ensure the technology's safety and efficacy, adhering to established agricultural regulations and ethical principles. This requires a nuanced understanding of stakeholder interests and the legal framework governing agricultural practices in Albania. The correct approach involves prioritizing a thorough, evidence-based assessment of the technology's impact, consulting relevant regulatory bodies, and ensuring transparent communication with all stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of responsible innovation and adherence to the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exams, implied emphasis on scientific integrity and ethical conduct within the Albanian agricultural sector. Specifically, it reflects the need to comply with any existing Albanian laws or guidelines concerning the introduction of new agricultural inputs or technologies, which would likely mandate safety testing and environmental impact assessments before widespread adoption. Ethical considerations would also demand a cautious approach that avoids potential harm to farmers, consumers, or the environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential economic benefits without adequate safety and environmental vetting would be ethically and regulatorily unsound, would disregard the precautionary principle, and potentially violate Albanian agricultural laws that aim to protect public health and the environment. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing official regulatory channels and directly promoting the technology to farmers would undermine the integrity of the regulatory system and expose farmers to unproven risks, violating principles of due diligence and responsible practice. Finally, an approach that dismisses potential negative impacts as insignificant without proper investigation would demonstrate a lack of scientific rigor and ethical responsibility, failing to uphold the standards expected of professionals in the agricultural field. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Second, thoroughly researching and understanding the applicable Albanian legal and regulatory framework for agricultural technologies. Third, evaluating the potential risks and benefits based on scientific evidence. Fourth, consulting with relevant authorities and experts. And fifth, communicating findings and decisions transparently and ethically. Question 16. Which approach would be most appropriate for the Agricultural University of Tirana when a significant industry partner requests the premature release of preliminary research findings that could influence market decisions, while local farming communities have expressed concerns about the long-term sustainability implications of the research? Option A. Delay all communication until the research is fully completed and validated, even if this means missing critical windows for stakeholder input and market adaptation. Option B. Focus solely on the scientific aspects of the research, disregarding stakeholder concerns as external pressures that could compromise objectivity. Option C. Expedite the release of preliminary findings to the industry partner to maintain a positive relationship and secure future funding, assuming the partner will manage the information responsibly. Option D. Prioritize adherence to university research protocols and Albanian agricultural laws, ensuring scientific integrity and transparent reporting through established channels, while actively engaging with all stakeholders to address concerns. The correct answer is D. Prioritize adherence to university research protocols and Albanian agricultural laws, ensuring scientific integrity and transparent reporting through established channels, while actively engaging with all stakeholders to address concerns. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in agricultural research and development, balancing the immediate needs of stakeholders with the long-term integrity of scientific findings and regulatory compliance. The Agricultural University of Tirana, as a public institution, has a responsibility to ensure its research is conducted ethically, transparently, and in accordance with Albanian agricultural regulations and university guidelines. Stakeholders, including farmers, industry partners, and the public, have legitimate interests in the outcomes of research, but these interests must not compromise the scientific process or regulatory adherence. The challenge lies in managing these diverse expectations while upholding the university's commitment to rigorous scientific standards and legal frameworks. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to established university research protocols and relevant Albanian agricultural laws. This means ensuring that all data collection, analysis, and reporting are conducted with scientific integrity, free from undue influence or pressure from any single stakeholder group. Transparency in methodology and results, coupled with a commitment to disseminating findings through appropriate academic and regulatory channels, is crucial. This approach safeguards the university's reputation, ensures the reliability of its research for future agricultural practices, and upholds the legal and ethical obligations of a public research institution. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the immediate demands of a specific industry partner, such as prematurely releasing preliminary findings or tailoring results to meet commercial objectives. This would violate principles of scientific objectivity and could lead to the dissemination of inaccurate or misleading information, potentially harming farmers and the agricultural sector. It would also likely contravene university policies on research integrity and potentially Albanian regulations governing agricultural research and product claims. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the concerns of local farming communities regarding the practical applicability or potential environmental impact of the research. While industry partners may have financial interests, the well-being and sustainability of local agriculture are paramount. Failing to engage with and consider these perspectives, and instead solely focusing on a narrow set of stakeholder interests, demonstrates a lack of comprehensive stakeholder engagement and a disregard for the broader societal impact of the research, which is often a consideration in public university mandates and agricultural policy. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the university's research ethics guidelines, Albanian agricultural legislation, and the specific objectives of the research project. It requires open communication with all relevant stakeholders to understand their perspectives and concerns. When conflicts arise, a structured approach to risk assessment and mitigation, guided by ethical principles and regulatory requirements, should be employed. This often involves seeking advice from university ethics committees or legal counsel to ensure all decisions are compliant and defensible. Question 17. Implementation of advanced precision agriculture equipment in student practical training programs at the Agricultural University of Tirana, considering budget constraints and the need for faculty training. Option A. Conduct a thorough needs assessment involving faculty and student representatives, research the most cost-effective and relevant technologies, and develop a phased implementation plan with a clear budget and training schedule, adhering to university procurement and financial regulations. Option B. Implement the new equipment solely based on the recommendations of a single technology vendor, without independent evaluation or consideration of alternative solutions or existing university infrastructure. Option C. Prioritize the purchase of basic, low-cost equipment that requires minimal training, even if it does not fully represent current industry standards. To avoid immediate budget overruns, Option D. Immediately procure the most technologically advanced equipment requested by a vocal student group, assuming external funding will eventually cover the costs, without formal approval or needs assessment. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough needs assessment involving faculty and student representatives, research the most cost-effective and relevant technologies, and develop a phased implementation plan with a clear budget and training schedule, adhering to university procurement and financial regulations. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for the Agricultural University of Tirana's administration in balancing the immediate needs of students with the long-term sustainability of its research programs, particularly concerning the introduction of new technologies. The core of the challenge lies in navigating the university's internal regulations, national agricultural policies, and ethical considerations regarding resource allocation and student welfare. A deep understanding of the university's governing statutes and relevant Albanian agricultural legislation is paramount. The correct approach involves a comprehensive stakeholder consultation process that prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and adherence to established university procedures. This approach ensures that any implementation of new technologies is aligned with the university's strategic goals, financial capabilities, and the educational objectives of its students, as outlined in the university's charter and relevant Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development guidelines. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and due diligence, fostering trust among students, faculty, and administrative bodies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on student demand, without considering the financial implications or the availability of trained personnel, would violate principles of sound financial management and operational feasibility, potentially contravening university financial regulations. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established procurement and approval processes for new equipment would risk non-compliance with national public procurement laws and university financial oversight policies, leading to potential legal and ethical breaches. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to assess the long-term maintenance and training needs for new technologies would be irresponsible, potentially leading to underutilized resources and a failure to achieve the intended educational or research benefits, thus not aligning with the university's mandate for effective resource stewardship. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This begins with clearly defining the problem and its scope. Next, identify all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Then, gather information on existing regulation, university policies, and best practices. Evaluate potential solutions against these criteria, considering feasibility, cost-effectiveness, and alignment with strategic objectives. Finally, implement the chosen solution with clear communication and a plan for monitoring and evaluation. Question 18. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the Agricultural University of Tirana is considering reallocating significant research funding. A group of influential farmers specializing in a single high-demand export crop are advocating for increased investment in research directly related to their specific cultivation practices and market access for this crop. They argue this will generate immediate economic benefits for their farms and, by extension, the national economy. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam, considering the university's broader mandate and the principles of responsible resource allocation? Option A. Redirect funding towards projects that address the immediate concerns of the most vocal stakeholder group, without conducting a comprehensive assessment of alternative research areas or their long-term impact on the agricultural sector. Option B. Prioritize research proposals that demonstrate a clear link to the strategic objectives of the Agricultural University of Tirana, National Agricultural Development Plans, and involve a broad consultation with diverse agricultural stakeholders to identify the most pressing research needs for sustainable and resilient Albanian agriculture. Option C. Focus research funding exclusively on projects that can attract immediate external commercial partnerships, even if these projects do not fully align with the university's core academic mission or the broader needs of Albanian agriculture. Option D. Allocate the majority of the research funding to the export crop initiative championed by the influential farmers, based on their promise of immediate economic returns and their perceived influence within the agricultural sector. The correct answer is B. Prioritize research proposals that demonstrate a clear link to the strategic objectives of the Agricultural University of Tirana, National Agricultural Development Plans, and involve a broad consultation with diverse agricultural stakeholders to identify the most pressing research needs for sustainable and resilient Albanian agriculture. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of agricultural stakeholders with the long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance of the Agricultural University of Tirana. The university, as an institution, has a responsibility to its students, faculty, researchers, and the broader agricultural sector it serves. Decisions made regarding resource allocation and research priorities must align with the university's mission and the legal framework governing higher education and agricultural development in Albania. The correct approach involves a comprehensive stakeholder consultation process that prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and adherence to the Agricultural University of Tirana's strategic plan and relevant national agricultural policies. This approach ensures that resource allocation for research and extension services is directed towards areas that offer the greatest potential benefit to Albanian agriculture, while also considering the university's capacity and long-term goals. It aligns with the ethical obligation to serve the public good and the regulatory requirement to operate within established institutional and national frameworks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial returns from a single crop, without considering broader agricultural needs or the university's diverse research capabilities, fails to uphold the university's mandate. This could lead to a misallocation of resources, neglecting critical areas like soil health, pest management, or diverse crop development, which are vital for long-term food security and economic stability. Such a narrow focus also risks violating regulatory guidelines that mandate a balanced and forward-looking approach to agricultural research and education. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the personal interests of a few influential farmers over the collective benefit of the agricultural community and the university's strategic objectives is ethically unsound and potentially violates principles of good governance and fair resource distribution. This could lead to biased research agendas and a failure to address systemic issues affecting the wider agricultural sector. A third incorrect approach that bypasses established university approval processes and relies on informal agreements with external entities without proper risk assessment or regulatory oversight exposes the university to significant reputational and financial risks. This undermines transparency and accountability, which are fundamental to the responsible operation of a public institution. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and its scope. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Next, they should gather objective data and evidence related to agricultural needs, market trends, and the university's research strengths. This information should then be analyzed against the university's strategic plan, national agricultural policies, and relevant legal and regulatory frameworks. A consultative process with stakeholders, ensuring diverse perspectives are heard and considered, is crucial. Finally, decisions should be made based on a thorough evaluation of potential impacts, risks, and benefits, with a commitment to transparency and accountability throughout the process. Question 19. During the evaluation of a proposed new irrigation technique for a region with significant agricultural activity, which stakeholder perspectives should be given absolute priority to ensure alignment with the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam framework and its commitment to sustainable agricultural development? Option A. The perspective of environmental scientists, emphasizing potential long-term ecological impacts and compliance with national environmental regulations. Option B. The perspective of agricultural economists, prioritizing the cost-effectiveness and market viability of the new irrigation technique. Option C. The perspective of local farmers, focusing on their immediate economic benefits and ease of adoption of the new technique. Option D. The perspective of university researchers, focusing on the scientific novelty and potential for academic publication of the new technique. The correct answer is C. The perspective of local farmers, focusing on their immediate economic benefits and ease of adoption of the new technique. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of agricultural stakeholders with the long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance mandated by the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam framework. The core tension lies in prioritizing immediate economic benefits for farmers against potential environmental impacts and adherence to established agricultural practices and research principles that the university aims to uphold. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed solutions are both practical for current agricultural realities and aligned with the university's educational and research mission. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment that considers the diverse needs and perspectives of all relevant stakeholders, including farmers, researchers, consumers, and environmental agencies, while strictly adhering to the principles and regulations governing agricultural education and practice in Albania, as implicitly defined by the scope of the Agricultural University of Tirana's entrance exam. This approach prioritizes evidence-based decision-making, ethical considerations regarding environmental stewardship, and alignment with the university's commitment to sustainable agricultural development. It ensures that any proposed solutions are not only economically viable, but also environmentally sound and educationally relevant, reflecting the university's core values. An approach that solely focuses on immediate economic gains for farmers, without considering potential long-term environmental degradation or the regulatory framework for agricultural research and education, represents a significant ethical and professional failure. This narrow focus ignores the university's mandate to foster sustainable practices and could lead to non-compliance with national agricultural policies or international best practices that the university is expected to promote. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes the adoption of novel but unproven technologies without rigorous scientific validation or consideration of local context, also fails professionally. This overlooks the university's role in promoting scientifically sound and contextually appropriate agricultural methods. Introducing untested technologies without due diligence risks economic losses for farmers, potential environmental harm, and undermines the credibility of agricultural research and education. A third incorrect approach, which dismisses the concerns of local farmers as uninformed or resistant to change, demonstrates a lack of respect for stakeholder engagement and practical agricultural realities. This failure to engage with the primary beneficiaries and practitioners of agriculture leads to solutions that are unlikely to be adopted or effective, violating principles of participatory development and practical application of knowledge, which are crucial for an agricultural university. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured stakeholder analysis, a thorough review of relevant Albanian agricultural laws and university guidelines, and an assessment of the scientific and environmental implications of any proposed action. Professionals should adopt a systems thinking approach, recognizing the interconnectedness of economic, social, and environmental factors in agriculture, and always strive for solutions that are both ethically defensible and practically implementable within the specific regulatory and educational context of the Agricultural University of Tirana. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a high probability of pest resistance developing in staple crops due to current farming practices, alongside a moderate risk of soil degradation in key agricultural regions. Considering the Agricultural University of Tirana's mandate to support sustainable agriculture and its entrance exam requirements, which approach best balances immediate stakeholder needs with long-term regulatory and environmental considerations for new research initiatives. Option A. Prioritize research into integrated pest management, IPM, strategies and organic farming methods that address both pest resistance and soil health, ensuring all proposed research aligns with Albanian environmental protection laws and university research ethics guidelines. Option B. Fast-track the approval of research proposals that promise significant short-term economic gains for farmers, even if they involve intensive chemical applications, and defer long-term environmental impact studies. Option C. Focus research efforts exclusively on theoretical advancements in plant genetics, assuming that practical applications will emerge organically without direct engagement with current farming challenges or regulatory frameworks. Option D. Initiate research projects focused on developing novel, high-yield crop varieties that can withstand current pest pressures, with a secondary focus on soil remediation techniques that can be rapidly implemented by farmers. Correct answer is D. Initiate research projects focused on developing novel, high-yield crop varieties that can withstand current pest pressures, with a secondary focus on soil remediation techniques that can be rapidly implemented by farmers. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of agricultural stakeholders with the long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance of the university's research programs. The entrance exam for the Agricultural University of Tirana is designed to assess a candidate's understanding of how to navigate such complex situations, ensuring they can make informed decisions that align with both practical agricultural needs and established academic and environmental guidelines. The correct approach involves prioritizing the development of research projects that demonstrably address critical agricultural challenges in Albania, while adhering strictly to the university's established research ethics, environmental impact assessment protocols, and the specific regulatory framework governing agricultural research and development in Albania. This approach is correct because it ensures that the university's resources are allocated effectively to solve real-world problems, fosters trust and collaboration with the agricultural community, and upholds the integrity and long-term viability of its research endeavors by respecting all applicable laws and ethical standards. It reflects a commitment to responsible innovation and sustainable agricultural practices, which are paramount for the Agricultural University of Tirana. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, high-visibility projects without considering their long-term environmental impact or regulatory feasibility would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for environmental protection laws and university research guidelines, potentially leading to unsustainable practices and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes projects with the highest potential for immediate financial return, neglecting their actual agricultural relevance or scientific merit, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a misaligned focus, prioritizing commercial interests over the core mission of the university and the needs of the agricultural sector, and potentially violating ethical guidelines for academic research funding and application. Finally, an approach that delays or ignores the need for stakeholder consultation, proceeding with research plans without engaging the farmers and local communities who will be most affected, is ethically unsound and professionally detrimental. This failure to consult violates principles of participatory research and can lead to the development of solutions that are not practical or accepted by the intended beneficiaries, undermining the university's role in serving the agricultural community. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the identified risks and opportunities. This involves a comprehensive review of the current agricultural landscape, existing research capabilities, and relevant Albanian regulations. Subsequently, they must engage in proactive stakeholder consultation to gather diverse perspectives and ensure alignment with community needs. The evaluation of potential research projects should then be based on a multi-criteria analysis that includes scientific merit, agricultural impact, environmental sustainability, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. This systematic process ensures that decisions are well-informed, responsible, and contribute positively to the agricultural sector and the university's mission.